Welcome to Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. I'm Kevin Parkerson.
And I'm Kevin Higgins. Together we bring you over 60 years in combined experience in global logistics.
In each episode, we'll dive into the latest industry trends, share practical tips, celebrate wins, and share stories from the logistics front lines, all while helping businesses optimize their logistics operations. So welcome to our special July 4th Independence Day episode. We're really excited about bringing a guest today, and I'll kind of kick it over to Higgins for a proper introduction.
Yeah, I'm super stoked on our guest today. KP and I talked about what we wanted to do for Independence Day. And honestly, there's one person that immediately came to mind. My best friend, Max, is not only a veteran, but he is a military historian. He loves all things history. He's an avid reader. He loves freedom. He loves this country. And so we thought that we would bring him on. He's also in the quasi logistics business for the company that he works for. They import a lot of containers. Max has traveled around the world. And so super excited to have him on to talk about what freedom means to him and appreciate his service to our country. So let's bring on Max Moore. Morning, Max.
How's it going?
Hey, Max. Hey, thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to kind of hear your story, your life story. And again, like Higgins said, thanks for your service. I believe you're an Army veteran, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So when I was younger, my dad worked for the government. So I was born in California. We moved to Detroit. And then when I was 4, we moved back to California. And my neighbors at the time, they were like quasi-grandparents because my grandparents lived way out of state. But he flew B-17 bombers with his brother during World War II. His wife fought in the Belgian underground, and she was his interpreter after the war. She had frostbite that was never healed from hiding with her brother in the wall of a castle in Belgium. Her sister fought in the underground. Her son was one of the early Green Berets in Vietnam. Their adopted son was in the military. So that was my base for what freedom looked like. And, they didn't talk a lot about it, but I was very proud to be their neighbor and friend. They were like grandparents, the sweetest people in the world. So that was kind of like, my grandfather on my mom's side, he was stationed in Iceland. So that was kind of my base and learning what they sacrificed and the things they saw. And then as I got older, I just a student of history. So when I reflect on, July 4th is our Independence Day, it's a great sense of pride for our country because at the time, there was a saying that the sun never set on the English Empire because everywhere the world went, there was England. And so you got to figure we were just a bunch of farmers. And like I always like to say, our country was founded on the middle finger because we just decided one day and said, no, we've had enough. So we're going to fight for our independence.
So Max,
go
ahead. You're definitely, the family history is really amazing to me. I hear a lot about families who just had this legacy of service to the country. And I think yours definitely falls into that category. Is that kind of what, drove you? You were destined to serve. What made you choose the Army?
My neighbor, he came home from Vietnam and then he was in the National Guard forever. And when I was 13, I got to go, he was a tank commander. So I got to go play Army for the weekend. And I thought that was pretty cool. So when I graduated high school in 87, I went into the National Guard. So I went to boot camp and then I spent 8 years in the Guard. I was a weapons repairer or armorer for a field artillery unit. So I got that. And, then I got married and had kids and it kind of gets in the way of family life. So I got out for that. But it was, it's like what we all did. Like probably 75% of the guys that graduated with me all went in the service. I still see a lot of them today. I know a lot of them, that was just what we did because it was still fresh. Vietnam was still fresh. When I went in, most of the veterans or most of the guys in my unit were Vietnam veterans just trying to get their 20 years in so they could get retirement pay. and all our neighbors, were either World War II, Korea, or Vietnam vets, growing up. So it was all around us, which this generation right now never, last couple three hasn't had. And then eventually the Iraq, Afghanistan vets will be the grandparents, and those will be around. But it was a, different time and feeling when we were kids. It was still pro-America. But, that's like I was saying earlier was, we were a bunch of farmers or agrarian society, and we picked up our pitchforks and muskets, and we beat the largest standing army in the world at the time, kicked them out. They came back again, kicked them out again. And so, as a country, North America, it's very advantageous for us because we've never been invaded. The only time, finger quote, we've been invaded was the war between the states or the Civil War. And that was, we tried to tear ourselves apart. So we have that as a great buffer for our independence. And so we have to send our troops overseas to keep our independence. And so I always like to remember all those, even though it's not a Veterans Day or Memorial Day. I mean, they're the ones who got us here today to have this day of hot dogs and hamburgers and fireworks. So to me, it's, it's remembrance and independence at the same time.
And Max, I think that's, that what you said is incredibly important because it's just been in the past probably handful of years for me, growing up, it was always, the 4th of July was the holiday, right? And just in the past couple of handful of years, I've started referring to it specifically as Independence Day, right? It falls on the 4th of July, but it is a celebration of our independence. And so I think that's an incredible, clarification. But I want to ask you a question, like, do you see a distinct difference in freedom versus independence?
Yeah,
and liberties. I want to throw liberties in there, between freedom and liberties.
With freedom comes liberties. That's what's great about our country. And independence, like we've lost it, but independence, we used to be like one of the few countries in the world we could produce every single thing that we needed, and we exported everything else: steel, aluminum, some of the best foundries in the world, shipping, petroleum, all that stuff. And what we've done is we've outsourced it. So we're no longer independent, right? So we've lost that, which bothers me in a business sense because we go out to the cheaper vendor. But we've kind of lost some of our independence that we fought for to stay independent. And that's what that isolationism that we've had as a country forever has been beneficial to us. So, I think there's a lot of things in independence and freedom that we have. And even, if you want to burn the flag, which turns my stomach and I want to punch you in the throat, but you have the right to do that for all the people that died for you to have that right. And that's always these things that I see on the news these days are sickening. But at the same time, you have that right as an American citizen. You would never have that freedom to do that in any other country in the world. You'd be killed or jailed, or you'd disappear and your family would disappear. So while it turns my stomach, it's your right as an American citizen. It's your freedom. It's guaranteed in our Constitution for you to do that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that perspective. So how do you and your family, with such rooted in service to our country, how do you celebrate Independence Day? What do you do? Typically for me and growing up, it was watermelon and fireworks. Like Higgins said, with the life stage, that we're at today, you become somewhat, reflective and understanding, the importance, the symbolism of Independence Day. We still celebrate with fireworks and watermelon, but it's definitely a reflective day and a celebration day. How do you and your family celebrate?
Well, so growing up in California, we moved here 13 years ago from to Northwest Arkansas from California. We weren't allowed to have fireworks growing up. So I'm like, every year I'm blowing something up in my yard because it's my right. Arkansas is the land of what you can do, not what you can't do. So I love living here and I love celebrating it. But to be honest with you, yes, we do barbecue and stuff. But my family and I, the way I raised my two boys, is year round we remember those that sacrifice. So it's a lifestyle, I guess I'd have to say. I'm a huge patriot, so I think about these things year round, Veterans Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July. I see a veteran, I think I still, Vietnam vets, I still go up to them and say, welcome home, because they never got that.
Yeah.
So it's just, I guess it's more of a lifestyle. I'm grateful every day for the country and the state that I live in.
I will attest to that because Max and I have been a lot of places, and everywhere we go, if there's somebody with a veteran's hat on or anything like that, Max is always approaching them and thanking them for their service. And like he said, welcoming them home, specifically if they're a Vietnam veteran. So he is by far the biggest patriot that I have had the pleasure of spending time with. And so, yeah. And I do want to show this because I just saw this the other day and I was hoping I could get this done before the 4th of July, but I don't know if you guys can see that or not. That's Max.
Fireworks director. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I run, you run. And I do
Yeah.
have a video of him running.
No, that shall not be shown.
It shall be shown. It's the intro into this segment.
Yes.
That picture would be a great intro, yes.
It was one of the funniest moments. I've never seen him run like that before. But
I don't run that a time I ran. Yeah.
That's funny.
So, yeah, I mean, like I said, my kids from day one, we used to watch every December 7th, the movie Pearl Harbor. My boys still to this day still like to watch that. They know that, November 11th was the end of World War One. It was the 11th month, 11th day, 11th hour. And that's why it used to be Remembrance Day. And then they changed it after World War One. So they understand the significance of that and all the other holidays of what to do and stuff. So I tried to raise them right, at least be respectful, be independent thinkers, which is what's great about our country, but also be respectful of those that died to get you to where you're at today. So,
yeah. Well, Max, this is the podcast that we have today, is real world global logistics, but we love the people stories and your story, your dedication, your family's dedication, to the country and in service. Are there any does one or two stories I'd love for you to share with our audience if you have one or two stories that really kind of set the tone for the day based on your experience in your service? Does anything stand out that I think will resonate with the audience?
I just, not necessarily in my experience, but listening to some of the stories of my neighbor, hiding in a haystack with her brother who was shot and getting pitchforked in the leg, and then having to hide with, and watching her friends get blown up and stuff there's a price to freedom. And the nightmares that she had, and her husband, greatest guy in the world, as most veterans from the war, he flew B-17s and came home, but stayed with him forever. And their son, that was the Green Beret, stories of when he came home and how long it took him to adjust, and he never really did. Mm-hmm. Those stories, it's like there's an impact. And it's an indelible memory on me growing up that I don't forget that there's a price to be paid. They may seem normal, but they're not. And then especially like the veterans today, I got a soft spot for them, So, I mean, it kind of all sticks out,
What's that, you and I both, I think we all grew up with people around us that were kind of the quiet generation. So I had, grandfathers, one grandfather and one great uncle who served and fought in World War II, and they never, they didn't talk. They didn't talk about it. It was something they did as service to their country and to the fellow Americans, and they saw things that we can never even imagine. And they did it with pride, and because that was what the right thing to do was.
I mean, well, the one story that sticks out of the legacy, there's two things. One, I read a book about the last survivors from World War One, and they interviewed this pilot who was a fighter pilot during World War One, and he was like 102 at the time. And they said, "Do you still have nightmares?" And he said, "Yes." And they said, "When was the last time you had one?" He said, "Last night." So it never left him. Mm. And the other one was my neighbor who was the special forces. He became a police officer later in life. So this is in the 80s, mid to late 80s. There was a hostage situation and he was trying to get the people out. The guy came around the corner. He dropped the guy, got the family out, but he checked out for a long time because it was all the memories coming back, from the war. So it's always stays with me. I love this country. I love the people that fought for it. I even love the people that hate this country because they don't understand, that because of all that, they can hate this
Yeah.
country and they're free, like the petroleum activists wearing a plastic vest with their plastic iPhone, their plastic sneakers, and their synthetic pants saying they hate the oil industry. Hey, have at it. You know what I mean? That's your right here. And that's the truest veteran statement ever,
Yeah. And
is what it is.
I'll attest that that's how he lives his life. So I appreciate Max continuing to remind me, because I can get frustrated with things that are going on, and he just continues to remind me that people fought and died for this country, and people have the right to say the things that they're saying, whether I agree with them or not. And so we have some wonderful conversations, very very colorful.
Yeah, I don't like most of the stuff that comes out of Kevin's mouth, but we're still friends. So,
Same.
yeah, there's a theme.
I don't know why anybody hangs around me, honestly. I think it's for my movie collection.
Yeah. Now, to sum it up, I'll segue into the transportation thing. The company I currently work for, we make compressed natural gas storage, and we store them in 40 and 45-foot Connex containers that are custom made and overseas. They're custom made. They're shipped here. We build everything in California, and then we transport supply gas or fuel for the fracking sites in West Texas, Midland, Odessa area, and then we do what's called peaking during the cold months in New York, because they won't let them put the pipeline through. So they fill our trailers up in Pennsylvania, drive into New York, and then inject it into the pipeline so that they have fuel for the winter and stuff. So we do our containers are intermodal. We're in Canada and the U.S., so they can go by ship or train if they have to. We haven't really had to have that yet, but we have to have that, the AVS, CERT, and CSC and all that for our containers in order to be able to have that intermodal.
Your business is fascinating, and I love hanging around Max. I learn something all the time. If anything needs to be fixed, like he said, he calls me if it's computer related, and I call him if it's anything else. He can literally and has fixed anything that I've thrown at him. So it's been
I keep
great.
Kevin away from tools, and he keeps me away from my iPhone. So we're good.
I would say, Max, just to segue a little bit, because Parkerson was interested in this. He's like, how do you know Max? And so I told him briefly the story of when we first met. So you remember that, right?
Yeah, I remember not. I don't like people for the most part. I like living in my house out in the sticks, and I can go weeks without going into town, and it makes me totally happy. My wife was in a hiking group and was friends with Kevin's ex-wife, and they thought it'd be fun to get the boys together. So both disgruntled Kevin and myself met at a restaurant, and we're like, who's this clown? So we just kind of sat there, and then we started talking about movies and Burt Reynolds movies, and then I think it was Hooper, right?
Yep.
So we started talking about Hooper, and it was like that moment from Step Brothers. Did we just become best friends? So I've never met anybody that even knew that movie Hooper. We just geeked out. And it was a slow roll, but when he got divorced, he called me up, and I said, come on over, brother. And we've been thick as thieves since that day.
Yeah.
It was 5-6 years now, something like that.
Yes, 6.5.
Because you know how he's got like the handsome one and the smarter one? It's okay to be the smart one. And I just give Kevin the handsome part,
Yeah, we're both in trouble.
That's a great story, and I'm not surprised at all that you both connected. Kevin did share a little bit of that story, and what he told me definitely matches with your story, so that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Max is, I do want to say this. I appreciate you coming on and talking to us. We could talk for hours about history, and KP and I would both learn a ton. Max is married to an amazing woman, Linda, and they've got two sons, Sam and Max. And so I know that there'll be big celebrations, recognitions this weekend as well. So I appreciate, Max, you doing this on short notice, and maybe sometime we'll have to talk a little bit more military history when it's appropriate, KP.
That'd be great. That's awesome.
Pick a topic, son.
Oh, I know. That's all we got to do.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife calls me the book of useless knowledge. So
we really appreciate you joining us today. And I know it was brief.
I appreciate.
We really appreciate your service, your family's service to the country. But as we wrap up this special Independence Day episode of Kev Talks, Let's take a moment to remember what July 4th represents, not just fireworks and flags, but the freedom to build, move, and grow. In global logistics, we connect the world, but here at home, we're grounded in something deeper, the American spirit of resilience, hard work, and forward motion. From the ports to the plants, the warehouses to the wheels on the road, it's people like you who keep things moving. So today, let's celebrate the freedom to innovate, the power to solve real problems, and the pride to doing the job right. So here's to the backbone of global trade and to the independent spirit that built this country and still drives it forward. Thanks for listening, and happy Independence Day, everyone.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kev Talks, Real World Global Logistics. If today's discussion inspired you, don't forget to follow, subscribe, rate, and share our podcast.
Remember, every great journey in logistics starts with a single step forward. Let's continue working together to transform the industry.